This is Ask Joe number... Oh, you know what? Our old friend Sasquatch is here to introduce it. Sasquatch, go right ahead. This is Ask Joe number 202. Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Home Studio Corner podcast, also known as Ask Joe. I'm glad you're here, and especially if you're here live. I see a lot of familiar faces. Nadim's on the live chat. Lee Borg, Jim Edgar, Seymour Zen, Robert Hammond, Johnny Fuller, Paul Lucas, Steve Rossbotham, Dan Updegraff, Sam Knack, Bengt Johnson from Sweden. They like their S's over there in Sweden. Who else is here? I think I saw Johnny Lipsham here. Keith, Simon Carlsted's here. I tell you, I need to do some sort of a tour of the Nordic countries. I think I've got enough people in like Norway and Sweden to do something. So let's make that happen. Come on. Put it together. All right. Okay, so sorry. I get caught up in the chat and I see what's happening. I'm trying to be involved in the chat, but then I forget that I'm actually talking and doing a podcast. So forgive me. I'm a bad podcaster. Hey, if you haven't checked out Gilder Cam, I'm having a lot of fun doing that. You can just go to homestudiocorner.com/GilderCam. That'll take you there. It's basically a daily vlog that I do, at least 5 or 6 days a week, and it's really fun for me. And who knows how long it'll last? But I'm really enjoying it, and it seems to be connecting with people. And it's a way for me to show stuff that I just haven't shown before. Like yesterday, I was doing a session in there on guitar, and most of the time I just didn't have really the mindset or the layout or the setup to stop and like show what I'm doing in those sessions. I was so focused, and now I've kind of reworked that to where I can show other things. Niels is from Denmark. He says to do Denmark as well. Okay, all right. I don't know. It's kind of a battle between like Scotland, London area, and then the Nordic countries. For y'all can battle it out, duke it out, book a venue. I'll come. We'll do something fun. So today, I don't have anything really to talk about today. Normally, I do some sort of a soliloquy, monologue. That's probably a better word for it. But you know what? I'm just going to skip it today because, honestly, with Gildercam, I've been doing a lot more of that kind of topical stuff there anyway. And I really just feel like answering your questions and diving in deep today into what's on your mind, what's troubling you, what's your problem. And I kind of want to go from there. One thing I have been thinking about a lot lately is this idea of time and complaining and dreams. And I was listening to, now don't let me finish. I was listening to a Tony Robbins ebook yesterday and today, or 2 days, the last couple days. And it's a lot of rah-rah and a lot of hoopla and a lot of other things, but he says some good stuff, and it's pretty interesting. Specifically talking about, I've just from him and from other places, I'm hearing a lot of, the only thing standing in the way of you doing what you want to do is doing it. And while that seems super simple, I think Casey Neistat said that there's a lot associated with that. So if you're hearing me talk more about that lately, it's because it's something I really, as a fly, there's always bugs in here. It's something I've been really focused on and really trying to lean into and figuring out ways that I can, through my music and through Home Studio Corner, help more people kind of get that push in the right direction. So no, I'm not turning into a motivational speaker. It's just something I like to see happen. And I'm seeing more and more of you dive in and do stuff you're uncomfortable with, and I love it. So let's get to the question, shall we? Boom. We're going to dive right in. Shortest monologue ever. You are welcome. If you love the monologues, then I apologize. But be sure you're checking out all the other stuff I'm putting out, because I'm doing a lot lately, and I'm trying to create as much value and make your life better. So I hope it's working, at least just a little bit. All right, let's jump over to the questions on Facebook. Those of you in the live chat, I'll get to you in a moment. You got yours coming. But in the meantime, I'm going to jump on with some of the folks from the old Facebook and answer some of their questions first. So if you haven't followed me on Facebook or Twitter, it's at Joe Gilder Music, and the YouTube channel is just Home Studio Corner. Please come subscribe and say hi. I do read the comments and I do reply. I'd love to reply to you. Here's one from Andrew Fitz. He says, I decided to mix my own stuff after the last time I asked a question. So thanks. I don't know what you asked or how I answered, but I hope that was a good experience for you. I can be a little harsh sometimes. My latest issue I've run into is I have a really rough attack on my guitars from the pick. What's the best way to go about minimizing that? That's a really good question. So too much pick attack. There's a couple things you can do. One, it's very likely that the pick attack is not bad and you have just become so obsessive about it that it's become bad for you. I've run into that a lot. Specifically, people who will send me songs to mix and they'll say, oh, we tried so hard to get rid of that pick attack, but we just couldn't. I don't know what to do, but just good luck with it. And I'll listen and it just sounds like a normal guitar with a normal pick sound. So that's a part of it. That could be it. The other thing that comes to mind is maybe use a different pick. A lot of it has to come down to recording. There's not a mixing trick. There are mixing things you can do, but to my mind, 88 times out of 100, that was a weird number. Most of the time, it's a recording problem, not a mixing problem. So mic placement does wonders for picking up little more or less pick sound. The size of pick that you use. I love a really thick... Hang on. Hold on. I got to find it. Where is it? Hang on. Hold, please. There. For you listening to the audio-only version of this, I apologize. See that right there? Can you see that very well? It's a Jazz 3. It's tiny and it's ridiculously thick. And I used it years ago, got away from it, got back to it, and I really like it. So I use that for most of my guitars. Cuts back on the pick noise a lot. Now, I will pull out a thin pick if I want something to be pretty, really kind of... What's the word? Snappy? Flappy? I don't know. When I want a lot of that pick sound, where that's almost all you hear, but most of the time that's what I'm using. And that would be my suggestion, is try different picks, different strum patterns, different technique, different recording, mic placement. All those things are what I would try first. Then if you get to the mix and there's a problem, you can try to find the frequency and EQ it out, but I don't have a lot of luck with that. And as with most of the answers to most of the questions, my answer is fix it back when you recorded it, not now while you're mixing it. Let's see. Thomas Bjorndal. See, where's Thomas from? Norway. Man, you want to know something funny? I don't do a lot of Facebook advertising at all, but occasionally it gives you the option to boost a post. So when I kicked off this latest season of Mixed Together, I wanted to make sure everybody saw the first video so they knew it was out there. So I just boosted it, and I've set up an audience that is made up of people in the US, Australia, the UK, and I want to say Sweden or Norway or both, because those seem to be the main places. I know I've got people elsewhere, but that's just a funny little side note for you. So Thomas from, what did we say? Norway? Thomas from Norway says, what would be a good workflow for mixing a whole concert? Split all the tracks to separate songs or keep it all in one song? Would like to keep the live with the audience feel to it. He's talking about doing it in Studio One. I can export mix down between markers and songs, and then I don't have the live connection between songs and the mastering window, essentially. Okay, so Thomas, what I would do is I would keep them all. I would have it. It was obviously all recorded together. I would have it all in one big session, but then I would do save as for each song, so that you can go back and tweak the mixes for each song without having to worry about fader and volume automation throughout the entire show. But then what I would do is I would leave like the room mics or the crowd mics, I would leave that in, and when I go and bounce it down, I would probably leave more room than you want. So a few seconds before the song starts, and almost going into the next song when you bounce it down. And then when you're in the mastering phase, you can play with those fades and fade the songs over the top of each other so it sounds cohesive, but at the same time, you're cutting out the awkward, the guitarist is over here tuning, the singer makes a stupid remark that you don't want on the live recording, but you do want it to still feel like a live show. I've done that before. It's actually surprising, if there's a 60-second gap between songs where there's awkward comments and nervous laughter, you can cut some of that back and it sounds like they just finished the song. There's a clap, there's a cough over here, next song starts. So really just by editing and overlapping a little bit, you can do a lot of that. I would probably try to do that in mastering and just leave a lot of room on the top and ends of your mixes to do some of that work. That'll probably work. You can try to do some of that in the mix window as well. It's just a little more, it's more editing than probably is necessary. I like having just the stereo track and just peel it back to where it needs to go and kind of go from there. Good question. I wish I had more live stuff to record. I need to go set up some shows, record some live stuff, and mix it. Okay, hold me to that, somebody. Okay, would you? Would you? Thanks. Regular Ben Holmes, who's one in the UK crowd, so, UK versus Norway. He says he can't be here today. My studio is built around a 10-year-old Focusrite Sapphire interface. It works fine and doesn't stop me from making music. Would I gain anything by buying a new interface? Are the preamps, etc., that much better now? That's a great question. No, I don't think if it's working, I don't think you'd gain much from a new interface. You're basically not to down. You can get great recordings with the stock preamps on an audio interface. And I'm sure if you ask someone at Focusrite, they would say, oh, heavens, they're much better now than they were 10 years ago. But in reality, they're probably a little bit better, but they're probably both good. Just because one thing's better doesn't make the other one not good. That said, I would think you would benefit more from things like preamps and microphones, different instruments, those types of things. I think a good preamp into, because the converters are fine in those boxes. If you want to upgrade the front end and essentially upgrade all your microphones by getting a really nice preamp, I would spend whatever you would have spent on an interface on a nice pre or a pair of pre's. So then you've got a kind of beefed up, better signal coming in, and just use the line inputs and the audio, the A to D converters on the interface. But yeah, switching interfaces is just boring. I know at some point they stop being supported, they stop working. You're 10 versions of the operating system in, and it was really just made to work with one 5 years ago. So those things can happen. But honestly, the interface is my least favorite part of the whole deal. I know it's the one with the bells and the whistles. It's the thing that probably you obsess over the most when you're starting out. But I think preamps are a little sexier to me than interfaces. And then things like microphones and guitars and musicians and performances, that's where I really get excited. So I just essentially told you to take that money and buy a musician and have them live in your studio. That's good advice, right? Yeah, no problem with that. Okay, so that's all the questions from the Facebook. I'll pop over and see if Twitter has anything, but Twitter folks don't ask these. They're doing their own thing, so they don't tend to ask these questions. Okay, let's go to the live chat. I will be with you live, folks, for the rest of your life or the next half hour, whichever comes first. All right, so was that a British accent, Steve? Yeah, it was kind of a last-minute attempt because in the back of my mind, it seems like I remember Focusrite being British. My boy Simon Carlstead, who has sat in this room. He sat right over there and recorded guitar. Came all the way over from Europe. He's another one. Chalk one up to the Nordic tour. But he's a phenomenal guitar player in a band called, why do I always forget your band name? It doesn't matter because he's doing a solo EP, which is even better. So look up Simon Carlstead. And I know I don't say it right. Carlstead. Simon Carlstead. This month, he says, I'm recording my first solo EP. Biggest challenge. Scarlet Blue is the band name. I'm sorry. Something about two different colors. I want to say purple. I don't know. Anyway, Simon writes, this month I am recording my first solo EP. My biggest challenge is that I'm very bad at singing. Do you have any general advice for how I should practice to become better? The thing is, being bad at singing is so relative, right? You may not be able to sing with a big full voice and a big vibrato thing, but you may have a really unique voice that people dig, right? I wouldn't say Jack White is a great singer per se, but he's really cool and unique. Or, Bob Dylan's the obvious example. I would say the biggest thing is to write songs that fit your voice, which I'm hoping you've already done. If not, write some songs that kind of you feel more comfortable singing. Don't write something, for example, the singer in your band is really great singer and very, very rock and very just kind of, I like his voice. I would say don't write stuff that's for him to sing if you can't sing that. Does that make sense? So, honestly, the best, from your question about practicing, the best way to practice is to record it and listen back. Essentially, go to the most painful route you can go, which is recording and listening back. I guess one step more painful would be to do it in front of someone else and have them critique you. But that could get weird. But yeah, recording it, you obviously have the technology to record it. I would record it and listen back and maybe get into some sort of habit of playing through the songs every day, playing and singing, so you're used to doing both. And because playing and singing always makes singing worse for me, at least. And then once you do that every day for 2 weeks and you're listening every day, when you sing, you'll have that in the back of your mind, what it sounded like, and it will slowly cause you to pay attention to the spots where you're weak and to take the spots that sound good and make sure they sound good every time. It's just practice. You'll never change your kind of the core, how your voice is, how your voice was designed from when you were a baby in your mama's womb, but you can practice and make the best of the pipes you got. That's a good t-shirt idea. Gary Keenan says, Joe, I seriously struggle with lyrics. It takes me a long time to write them. Do you think it's better to do it in one sitting? You can watch, you've seen I'm releasing a new round of Songwriting Corner videos, which are, in my opinion, super awkward. It's where I sit and write a song, and if it's a 30, 45-minute video, probably 20 minutes is me sitting there like this, thinking. So to me, that's awkward, but some people seem to like it. Anyway, I tend to write music and lyrics together, and I tend to write it fairly quickly. Now, one thing I said, I forget where I said it. I'm saying things in lots of places lately. If you aren't good with words, you need to spend a lot more time with words if you want to be good with words. One option is to partner up with someone who is good with words and not good with lyrics. I think we talked about that last week. But another option is, if you want to be good with words, don't start with just sitting down to write a song. Get yourself a cute little notebook, like a Moleskine or something like that, and start writing every day. Like, write down your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions. I know, that seems weird. Well, if you're trying to write music, that's essentially what you're doing. You're trying to write your thoughts and emotions to musical form. But if you're not used to writing those down, and the only time you ever try to think that way is when you've got a guitar in front of you, then no, you can't expect to get very good. The reason I tend to be able to come up with words fairly quickly is because I've spent hang on. This right here is why I'm good with words. These are journals upon journals upon journals of just me thinking through life, and that's not even all of them. That's why I can write a song fairly quickly. Does that make sense? So, 20 years of writing in a journal, that's what that'll do for you. So, am I saying you can't be better by next week? No, but it is going to take a lot of consistent, ongoing effort if that's what you want to be good at. For me, I like writing. I like literally sitting down with a pen. It's very cathartic for me. So that may not be the same for you, and I might not be the same thing as you. But that's my take on the matter. You may disagree, you may try it, you may not, whatever. But those are my thoughts, if that makes sense. Good question, though. Okay. Gabriel says, do you care about using the same mic for overheads and room mics on drum kit, or even for stereo miking an instrument, not necessarily matched pair, but let's say the same brand and model? I could not care less, especially for overhead and room. They're completely different things. I never try to use the same mic. So, no. And if stereo miking, I do use the same ones because I have two of the same. But in the years past when I didn't have two of the same and I wanted to stereo mic something, I just put two up and I matched them a little bit level-wise, and it's great. It's fine. There are too many purists out there who are like, you must have a matched pair with consecutive serial numbers if you want an accurate stereo image of the acoustic guitar that will be buried in your rock mix. Who cares? Remus Dumitroscu says, what materials do you recommend for a drum cage for live mixing? Everywhere I've seen uses the pretty standard, that plastic, drummers would know what it's called, the cage thing, the glass, plastic, anyway. Drummers in the chat, let him know what he should use. What brand of cables do you use and how many do you buy at one time? Most of the cables I have are Proco. That's kind of the house brand at Sweetwater. Lifetime warranty. They sound and work fine. I use a Proco Snake to get to the other room. I've got a few monster cables. I've got a few others, I think, but those, when I worked for a rep manufacturing monster, I got a bunch of monster cables because I could get them at a reasonable price, but I just can't spend $50 on a mic cable. I just don't have it in me, especially if I'm recording everything in there and it's running through a Proco Snake. I'm guessing I lose any benefit once it goes through the snake anyway. And at the end of the day, could I get a 10% improvement by getting all Mogami cables? Maybe. I just don't care. There's a theme today of me not caring about anything. As far as how many do I buy at a time, I just buy what I need. So for a long time, I had maybe 4 or 5 because I only ever really recorded 4 or 5 things in my studio. Then if I had a big tracking day, I bought the cables I needed for that day. And now I've got a bunch all over. Big stack of them. But by the way, speaking of cable, if you don't know how to properly wrap cable, you need to... Somebody remind me to do that in a Gilder Cam video because that is stupid important. If you do the whole like wrap it over your elbow thing like you do with an extension cord for doing yard work, you are doing it wrong and you are a bad person. I'm kidding. You're not a bad person, but you got to figure that out to make it last longer and to make them sit in a nice little circle. If you do the over the elbow, they get all twisty and awkward and makes you mad. So don't do it. Do you set up markers, encourage the player, or do all the markers, naming, and small stuff happen after? Does the client want attention on them, or do you want to focus on time management? I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. Do I set up markers in the session? I do. It's usually an after-the-fact thing because I just forget. Yeah, I think you definitely need to... Robert, funny. Anyway, I think you definitely need to... pay attention to the musician, right? If they think you're always thinking about something else, they can tell, right? If you're more concerned with time management than you are with the music, then something's missing out. So I don't want you to get my friend Eric. We were at dinner the other night, and he said he was watching some of the Gilder Cam videos, and he's like, "Man, you really structure your days. Like you're really disciplined and structured." And I said, "Well, I mean, I aim for structure, but I almost never hit it. The plan never really ends up making its way, and like real life doesn't really happen like the plan most of the time. But especially in the studio yesterday, for example, I gave myself some specifics I wanted to do, work on the guitars on this song and percussion, and then record vocals for this other song. But once creativity hit and I felt inspired and had some ideas and stuff, I ran with it, right? And I didn't get to the second song, but I got more done on the first song. So don't think that it's all about sticking to a very, very tight, strict schedule. I think deadlines are important. But the in-between now and the deadline, I think, can be pretty loose because you just never know what, you may have found a really cool guitar tone because your 2-year-olds were in there turning all the knobs, and when you turned it on, it sounded crazy, and that inspired you for a guitar part on a song that you weren't ready to record. I would do that now while you're feeling the inspiration, if that makes sense. So good question. Why? But Mario says, watched your Gilder Cam video today and saw you recorded 10 tracks for a song. My question is, how do you keep from going too far with recording a whole bunch of tracks and keep it tasteful? It's a lot of trial and error. So if you were here early for the live stream, I had that song playing, the whole thing, just the acoustic guitars and the percussion. It's a lot of trial and error. For me, the big thing is, like I had 3 guitars just playing the same strum pattern, but at different voicings, different capos. And that sounded good. I wanted more. And so for me, it was a lot of melodic parts, some different rhythmic parts, some melodic parts. And I really just start to I add in one part that feels good, and then I say, okay, what can complement that? Either to play on top of that or play an octave above that, or to play in that gap before that part comes in and start to kind of fill in the space in a way that feels right. You can always go too far. I would rather throw down just a bunch of ideas and see what sticks than try to keep to some minimal number of tracks just for the sake of a minimal number of tracks. If you had said, is 10 guitars too many? I would have said yes. But then I recorded them and you listen to it and it doesn't sound like, oh man, that's too many guitars. It just sounds like guitars, right? You wouldn't be able to say that's 10. It just happens to be 10. Are you into any pop music? I don't listen to a ton of pop music. I listened to the Ed Sheeran record, the latest one, and I dig a lot of the stuff on there. I was kind of surprised how folky it was. Some of the songs, so I like that. I'm not really set up to produce a big you know, synth-driven electronic pop song, and I don't really. Maybe one day I will, but I like more recording instruments with a microphone for the most part. So that's where I land. I'm not against it. I've never kind of gone in that direction, personal taste wise or client wise. I've done some pop stuff, but it's leaned more towards rock than pop in most scenarios. Roman from Vienna, Austria says, I have a question about. I have a lot of trouble at the moment. What do you do for getting your ears fresh again after getting lost in mixing? Not listening to anything for a day? I think any kind of break is good. Maybe a break and watch a YouTube video, or go to bed, go take a shower, go for a walk, go exercise and come back. Anything to just kind of get your ears out of that mode of listening and doing something else, so when you come back, you kind of have fresh ears. I've heard of people, they'll go and put their head next to a running water at the sink, and that white noise refreshes their ears and they can go back in. I've never tried it. It sounds kind of fun, especially if you just dunk your head under the water and then come back in without drying off. That'd be kind of fun too. Gabriel says, large versus pencil condensers. I'm just trying to decide what to get for room overheads, and as well, I have a pair that can work for stereo miking, or doesn't it matter? So I tend to prefer, if you could only have one mic, I'd go large diaphragm condenser. But if you have, excuse me, but I've got those Earthworks small diaphragm, and they're great. They can be a little bright, they can be a little too detailed, but they're actually really, really great sounding mics. I use them for all my acoustic guitars and for overheads for the most part when I'm doing drums. So they're great. So I'd say you can get a great sound with either. You've heard the best overhead sound you've heard in your life. You've heard it on both small diaphragm and large diaphragm. Best acoustic guitar sound you've heard has been on any kind of microphone you can get access to, right? It's just a small piece of the puzzle. I do tend to like large diaphragms in general, just because you can do more with them. But small diaphragms definitely have their place and can do some good work. Bunch of smart Alex in the chat are asking me how to wrap a cable now because I said, remind me. You're funny. Supersonics HQ says, hey Joe, I'm looking at the idea of starting an audio podcast and YouTube channel. Any tips on doing screen capture when your OS is too outdated for ScreenFlow? Update your OS. That's my advice. If you want to do this, you got to do it right. Even if, it may mean shelling out to update other stuff to be able to do it, but I can only give advice of stuff I've done, and that's what I've done. Daniel says, I've noticed I sing better when playing guitar, but would like to record both guitar and vocals separately to get the best take. Any advice on recording vocals only while still playing guitar? You want to record them separately or together? That's really the question you have to answer. Do you, maybe holding a guitar in your hand is enough to get you in the zone to do it? Or maybe just get really good at playing and singing, and the bleed that happens between the microphones when you do them at the same time is worth, the downside of that bleed is way worth the risk because the performance is so much better on the other side. I would do a lot of recording and compare and see, if it really is better, because chances are it's all in your head. You think it's better or worse. Maybe you feel like the guitar distracts from your voice, when in reality, maybe your voice needs work and needs attention, and you need to put the guitar down so you can do it well. But as far as if you're asking, someone saying to do it to a click. So yeah, if you're talking about how to keep it lined up, record the guitar to a metronome and then record the vocal on top of it. I don't think that's what you were asking. But yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, overdubbing the guitars, that's just normal recording workflow. You can record two microphones, one on the voice, one on the guitar, or you can record the guitar first and then record singing. That's totally the way to do it. What do you think, this is from Eric, what do you think about amp VSTs? So amp modelers and things like that. I've got the Avid 11 rack. I love the sound of the Kemper profiling amp. I've never owned one, but I've been on sessions where the guy played them. I think they're great. The software I don't use, not because I'm against it as much as I'm against it. I don't like using software for my guitar tones. I like to have a piece of gear, whether it's an amp and a pedal board or an 11 rack or a Kemper if I ever get one. I like the idea of having it there and running audio into my computer. I don't like having to save software settings. I don't like having to use a mouse while I'm playing guitar. I'd rather reach and turn a knob. It's just the way I've done it. And also, I don't for me, the way I record, I listen to everything through my mixer, which, if you didn't know, I've got the PreSonus Studio Live 24-channel console. I like to listen through there so I don't have any latency. So I can have my buffer setting as high as I want, and I'm not experiencing any latency. But if I start recording guitar through a plugin that I have to deal with, I just would rather just record it through an 11 rack or through an amp and not ever have to touch my latency settings. So there you go. What do you use to keep track of tracks you've recorded during a session? Explain your question further, Robert. Gary, have you ever used FL Studio? Nope. I think I had a friend who used Fruity Loops, and I saw it once, and that was it. Are there any music and songs you dislike? Sure. Everybody dislikes stuff. That's what's great about music. What 10,000 people might like, I might dislike, and doesn't really make either of us wrong. Stian says, you recorded some children's Christian songs a while ago with a woman. You showed us a song where I think the chorus is Drop Your Nets and Follow Me. What was her name? Is she on Spotify? That's a good question. She has not released it yet. Her name is Shannon Applin. She released the Christmas song on a Christmas compilation thing, but I think she just got bogged down with life and hasn't done like the artwork yet. But it was a cool little project. It was fun to have kids in here recording and all that. So I don't think, you can look her up, but I don't think it's out there yet. You could probably use a couple of fat heads for overheads. Yes, I've got a pair of those. I haven't used them for overheads yet. The problem with that is my room doesn't sound very good, and I don't want the figure 8 pattern. I don't want to pick up more room than I need to. So, because I've done that for a few different sessions, and while it sounds pretty good, because it's figure 8, it picks up a lot of the room on the back end side, and I kind of would rather not do that if I can. Joe, do you feel room calibration software is beneficial or smoke and mirrors to grab more of your money? I probably fall somewhere in between. I think it's valuable. I don't think it's the reason people have success with their mixes. I think you can learn to mix, set up your room in a way that is most beneficial, use whatever kind of treatment you can, but the biggest thing is learn how to mix in your system, because you can learn how to mix in any system. It just takes work. If the room calibration software makes that work easier for you and you can get there faster, great, but nothing's going to ever completely solve your room problems. And a lot of it just comes down to experience. Like this room is not properly treated, but I get good mixes because I know these speakers really well, and I learned this room, and I put up enough treatment to do the trick without putting up too much, and I just made it work. I don't know. I'm not against it. I had it once. I didn't like the extra work. Hey Joe, I can never make my room mic sound really good. Do I have to have room mics at drum recording? No, you don't have to. Try compressing them really, really aggressively and then rolling off the top end. Suddenly it'll sound like Bonham was in there. Hey Joe, check out ADX Tracks. It's a vocal removal isolation program. It does audio source separation and not any center pan removal. That's great. I have no interest in removing vocals. I posted that video years ago just on a whim, and I get so many people contacting me to remove vocals from their songs. It's not something I have any interest in, but I appreciate the shout out. Maybe somebody else is interested in it. I just don't see any why. I would rather create the song and then sing it rather than remove them from someone else's song. Plus there's some copyright problems there. I don't know exactly. Any beginner advice on singing, vocal exercises, what has helped you in the past? I don't do vocal exercises. I just sing and record myself a lot and listen back and critique myself and then do it all over again. Let's see. Is there a page, this is from Stian again, where we can check out the various artists and bands you've produced? The songs we see you working on with often get stuck in my head. Best cure to listen to the whole thing. That is a great question. There's not a page. I'm a bad person for not having a page. Remind me. The thing is, I do most of the time I'm working on my own stuff, and then we get the occasional person in here that I'm working on. But yeah, I should have some sort of way of doing that. A lot of it is stuff like the stuff I'm working on for Ben Holmes. You've seen me do some guitar sessions for him. It's his project. I'm just playing guitar and critiquing it and mastering it, but he's doing everything else. So I don't have, it's not really, Anyway, have you ever done a headphone-only mix and did it work out well? Yeah, headphone-only mix can work well. It's a little harder because the balance for me is a little harder to get right. I get the vocals too loud usually when I mix on headphones, but you can overcome that fairly easily. You can change that question to, have you ever done a mix on blank and did it work out well? And my answer would be yes, because I'm good at mixing. I don't say that to be a jerk. I just say that because I've put in the work and I've put in years and years of learning how to mix so that I can mix on whatever you throw in front of me. I'm not the best mixer in the world, but I make results that I'm happy with, which is really what we're all after. But yes, absolutely headphones. You can mix well on Apple earbuds. You can get a mix on tiny little speakers. You just got to make it work, make it happen. Thoughts on electronic drums? I think they're a really cool tool, especially when you combine them with real samples. I still will always prefer a real kit in a real room because there's something, I could record 10 albums in this room, 10 different drummers, 10 different kits, and I would have 10 different drum sounds. And no two projects would sound exactly the same. And for me, that's both a good and a bad thing, right? This one may have all these problems that I had to work around in the recording and the mix, but for the most part, I like that uniqueness of it. Versus if you use a set kit, an electronic drum kit, everything you do is going to have that same sound until you change it, and which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I like the idea of a real drummer smacking a thing in a room and making really loud sounds. Simon wants to know what butter compression is. So I don't know why I call it that. Probably because I like butter. But it's a smooth compression. I heard it from, I think I first heard about it from Kevin Ward, I believe. He didn't call it butter compression, but it's basically you turn the threshold all the way down, turn the ratio all the way down, and then you slowly raise the ratio. And so you only need like a 1.3 to 1 ratio before a decent amount of compression starts happening, and you end up with a really smooth, constant compression thing that's happening. Favorite song of yours that you've released? Question from Lewis. That's like picking your favorite kid. I really dig the song, even though the snare drum is jacked up on that last EP, I really dig the song Someone to Blame. It just got away from me in a good way, production-wise, and just got massive. It starts off fairly big, and it just gets bigger until that bridge is like this massive climax of energy. And I really dig that song right now. This is a more sarcastic question than a serious one, but would you ever use Linux as a primary OS? No, because I like Apple and it works, and I don't know a thing about Linux. It's kind of like people who say, oh, Joe, you should really try out such and such software. It's great. I'm sure it's great, and I'm sure it's probably better than what I'm using, but I have no interest in changing. If it's working for me, I don't want to change it, because that means I have to learn a new system, and then I'm not making as much music. I'm spending time learning a system. I would rather not spend time learning a system. That's why you'll probably get bored that my setup, if this is your first video you've ever seen of me, if you watch for a year, you'll see my setup won't change much. I might get a new guitar occasionally or a new mic, but I'll probably still be using Studio One and some mostly stock plugins. And it just works for me. Some comments about Linux that I don't understand. Here's one from Dan. Says, in the song Fool's Gold, which we're mixing in the Mix Together Season 2, it's a song from Sunday Muse. He says, that center panned acoustic guitar you and I can't get sounding right is typically how my own recordings sound. What do you think caused, in their case, bad mic placement? Well, part of it is it's a fingerstyle guitar, which is just always harder to record. And then I don't know. That could be what the guitar sounded like. I think it was the mic placement mostly, because I know they perform it fairly well. They just didn't do a good job of capturing it well. And so if you're in the same boat, then you need to do a better job of capturing it, which means you might need to play better. You might need a better microphone. You might need a better place to place the microphone. You might need to spend an entire day putting the microphone in every single different position you can think of until you get a sound that you think is good. Or sit there and listen to yourself, really critically listen to what you're doing and the stuff you're playing, and see if you like that sound, because it may be capturing it perfectly and you just don't have good guitar tone. I mean, that's at least an option you have to consider. So many times, you ever heard of what is it called, Occam's razor, where it says the simplest solution is usually the best one? So I talk to Pam all the time. When she does a lot of customer service for Home Studio Corner. So a lot of people, if they can't log in, they can't get access, they can't figure out their bill and things like that. 9 times out of 10, I tell her just to ask them a clarifying question, because usually it's something they overlooked, like they typed their email address wrong and that's why they can't get in or something like that. And it's funny, but it's true. It almost always is true that the simple solution is they mess something up versus my entire system broke down and isn't working anymore. So it's kind of the same thing. If you consistently are getting bad guitar recordings, it could be that you're not a good guitar player, or that you need to practice that and get better at that, then move on to getting better at recording, and then move on to getting better at mixing. But yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. Have you ever gone back and listened to one of your first mixes, then remixed it with your new knowledge and gear? Nope, not ever. I don't think there's any point to that. That mix was a snapshot of who I was musically and artistically at that time, and I don't want to mess with that. It has captured who I am. I write better songs now, and I record better now, so going back and remixing a bad song with a bad recording doesn't make any sense. All right, that's all the time I have for today. Thank you so much.